first of all, welcome very much. It's really great to see you guys here today. It's the first joint DAO talk between Bundesblock and DAO Suisse. It's a joint initiative idea. What I think started some month ago, where Bundesblock and DAO Suisse, we had this discussion that it would be cool to bring together DAO enthusiasts from Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. So this is the first, hopefully, of a series of different webinars and events what we are organizing. We are really happy that we have so many amazing speakers here today. For the structure of the day, first we have a keynote from Christoph, the DAO OG in this room right now, giving us some more insights on where we are coming from in the DAO. That will last for around 15 minutes. You can ask 1 or 2 questions then. And then after that, we have a panel of representatives from Switzerland, Germany, and Austria from different protocols and associations, which will last for around 35 minutes. And at the end, we also have a Q&A where you can ask all the questions. For us, the ambition or the goal for this event today is that we have a platform where we can engage here around the thought process on the innovation challenges, what we see right now in the DAO ecosystem in the DACH region. And for that, I mentioned that before, we have the keynote by Christoph, who is the DAO OG here. For the panel, we have 5 amazing speakers. Stephen from SafeDAO, who's a protocol designer there. Una, who is a researcher at ETH Zurich, and also like a founding member of DAO Suisse. We have Robert Müller from Bundesblock, Alexander Hannemann from Bundesblock, and we have Gustav Hemmelmeier from Kilt Protocol, who's a senior legal counsel there. And with that, if it's okay for everybody, I would hand it over to Christoph. And I think you prepared some slides and kick it off.
Thank you very much. So thank you for the invitation. Happy to speak here. I actually did prepare some original content in the sense of I have not really given the DAO talk since a while. So what I did, I actually looked up some older presentation I gave in 2016 and selected some slides, which I actually gave at DEF CON 1 at announcing the DAO, because my goal is now to give you an understanding of our thought process back then, how we envisioned the DAO in 2016 to work. And then I will only say a very few words about maybe what I'm missing today or what I would hope for that today's DAOs today would also do a little bit more. And then I leave it up to those who are actually currently working in DAOs and looking forward to the panel. So let me share my very few slides. So this slide, this was shown at DEF CON 0, not DEF CON 0, DEF CON 1 in London. And this was actually prepared one day before the presentation, because the decision to do a DAO actually really happened one day before the presentation. So we initially, like where we did come from, was we did Slockit, we wanted to do a fundraise, we thought about the Slockit token. And so we thought about people investing in a Slockit smart contract, getting Slockit tokens, and we would get the money. The next step of this was, no, let's keep the money in the contract, and we have to make proposals to get the money out so the token voters would vote on them. And then the next step was everybody can make a proposal and everybody can get money out, and it's a completely open thing. So, and this here, what I call business model for the DAO, was how we envisioned it to make money. So you would see the DAO on the left as a smart contract, where people would put Ether in. Here in this slide, it was even called Slok tokens in November. Later on, it was just DAO tokens. And would get tokens out. They would get rewards if the products built by the DAO would be used, and they could vote on how the DAO would operate. But the narrative in the beginning and how we envisioned it was that the DAO would build something we did call the universal sharing network, meaning a decentralized sharing economy. And they would actually hire what we called service providers to do some work for them. So it was not intended to be something like a decentralized investment fund. This happened later as the DAO became too big, the narrative changed. But at that point, when we envisioned it, we saw that companies such as us, as Slockit, our company back then, in our case, we would produce smart locks. We called them Sloks, and we would market them. We might make partnerships and so on. And every time they would be used, which would be on-chain, there would be an on-chain transaction where someone would rent out an apartment, rent out a bike, or renting out or sharing anything. And when someone would pay for it, a percentage fee of this transaction would go to the DAO. So this was really an on-chain business where the DAO would make money from the products we make, because the usage of the product would also happen on-chain. So you could take a fee. So this was the original idea. So a percentage of every transaction and also one-time deployment fee every time a so-called slug would be used. Yeah. Taking this one step further, how would this look like? So the DAO would order the building of products by contractors. So those contractors would build things. And back then, this was 2016, everyone saw that everything happens on-chain. So every product is used on-chain. Every rental process is on-chain. Whatever they would do, it's on-chain. And if it's on-chain, well, they build those products, and every time they are used on-chain, the DAO would get a fee. So it would actually make money. So it's like a business. And so not like a venture fund, so they would hire us for building those slots. They would maybe hire a marketing agency and pay them a couple of $1 million to market those products. They hired another company to build. And there were even lawyers back then who said, we can create a legal entity around the DAO, maybe in Switzerland or somewhere else, and would work for the DAO. So the idea would be everyone who would work for the vision of the DAO, meaning building this universal share network, who could get paid by the DAO, and DAO token holders will only vote for who to engage with, like which agencies, which lawyers, which marketing companies, which product building companies they would hire to build things. And even us, like if you look at the smart contract we put out for getting paid, it was not just that the DAO would pay us directly a lump sum, it would that the money would go into a smart contract and we would get a monthly payout. And the DAO could fire us at any time and get the remaining money back from that contract. This is how, if you look at the code on GitHub, how it was envisioned. So here's another picture of the same thing. So everybody could make a proposal to work for the DAO and for its vision. DAO token holders would vote and if it would hire them or not. Then they, in our case, develop the product, it gets deployed and makes them money forever. So this was the vision of the DAO. So what happened afterwards? Maybe, okay, one more. This is just another picture of those original presentation, very similar. So where we had the DAO code purpose was securely holding Ether. We know it failed at doing this. I mean, the original DAO contract of, you know the story, had a bug, lost Ether. Let's not go into all the details, you know all of this story, but I just want to, the purpose was DAO holding the Ether, tracking DAO token ownership because DAO tokens were freely tradable. It defines the governance. And the governance process was extremely simple, meaning everybody can make a proposal, people can vote on it. There was a minimum amount which needs to participate in the vote for the vote to be valid. I think the beginning was even 20%, but if it's not reached, it's halving every, I think, 4 weeks or so. So it automatically go down until it reaches the quorum. And then more than 50% need to vote in favor of it for it to get executed. And this is actually it. That was. And the limit back then was actually how much you could fit into one block. So in terms of block gas limit was about 3.1 million. And I could not add any more lines of code because they would go over the block gas limit and could not deploy the smart contract. So this was one reason why it was so simple. So not really very simple code. Then the contractors were expected to have a smart contract where the business model is defined, for example, paying back a percentage when the product is used on chain. Operational parameters, payment terms, such as we're getting paid over 4 years and we have monthly payments, and at any time they could fire us and get the money back. So the contractors were expected to have a smart contract, and the DAO curators were expected to inspect that the contract does what it says it does. This was how we envisioned the DAO. So you know what happened afterwards. We had a lot of people putting money into. This was actually the cap table, if you want. So it was pretty distributed. So almost 23,500 total token holders. The top 50 holders only owned 42% together. And some of them were exchanges, meaning exchanges where you have maybe thousands of people actually holding DAO tokens on this exchange. So even a bit more distributed, but maybe also some owners having several addresses. We don't know. Technically, it's possible for one person to have all of those addresses, very unlikely. And it's possible that one address represents a lot of people having that, being part of an exchange or something like this. But the narrative which I just started with changed dramatically during the fundraise. So after I think the first 5 or 10 million going in, and this was already more than we expected, we had about 5,000 people in Slack. So if everybody of them would invest 1,000 euros, you would have something like 5 million. This was our expectation from the DAO. So when the DAO grew to, let's say, 10 or 20 million, it was still like the Slockit DAO, kind of like building the Slockit vision and the universal share network and so on. But then after, let's say, 20, 30, 40 million, at some point, the narrative changed towards, this is now the application layer index fund of Ethereum, something like this. Meaning every application out there would not do their own token or ICO. They would ask for funding from the DAO, completely unrelated to our vision of a universal sharing network, but just every Ethereum project would be funded by the DAO. And then it's become something like a venture fund. And this is, if you want to invest in the application layer of Ethereum, you would invest into the DAO. And this is how the narrative changed. And because of this, many more people invested in it, and it ended up almost 12 million Ether, at the time 150 million euros. So this is in short the story of the DAO. And now, just to finish it up, what is a DAO? There are many definitions of it. For me, it was always, you have a formalized on-chain governance, which is very specific and put into code. And this includes treasury management, and this is very new. This is something we only have because of blockchain and smart contracts, that you have on-chain treasury management, and you have on-chain formalized governance. But I believe there's a very big spectrum from having even a very traditional hierarchy, which you can still formalize, or one human, one vote. Even the DAO was not that decentralized. You had a plutocracy, not a democracy. Sometimes I'm hearing we have a democratic DAO. The DAO was plutocratic, meaning more money, more vote, and not one human, one vote. So, and in between this, you have a lot of different things like delegated votings, you can have boards, and you can have all kinds of plutocracy, you can have governments, experimentations. And I think there were a lot of DAO frameworks just experimented with what kind of formalized governance you would use. That's something which happened after the DAO. There was a lot of innovation in this space. But for me, every organization which has an on-chain formalized governance and ideally also on-chain treasury management, I see as a DAO. And there's a lot of different variation of this. Something which I would like to see more of today, and today there's so many different DAOs, so it's very difficult to say, like, in general, this is happening or not happening, because every DAO is behaving a bit differently. But what I hoped for was some more on-chain revenue and on-chain making money. Meaning, you usually have treasury management and on-chain voting, what happens with the money, but you often don't have this on-chain flow back of money, meaning when the product is used. So that those products also have business models which work on-chain, which can pay back revenue. I mean, we're seeing it a little bit with Uniswap. Maybe in the future, you have those Uniswap tokens. They could decide to get some on-chain fees. This is going into this direction, having an on-chain business model with decentralized governance. And I hope to see a little bit more of this going into this direction. It's not just governance and voting, but the actual business, getting revenues, fee, making decisions in this regard, having the complete finance, if you want, on-chain, is possible for some of the applications. But I'm very interested to hear more today from the others who are working in that space. And thank you very much for your attention. I think if you have some questions, maybe 1 or 2 minutes is left before we go to the panel.
So, guys, is there a question, or like we have time for 1 or 2 questions if you want? Everybody can unmute and ask a question.
Hi, I would have a question. Thanks a lot for the interesting insights. I was just wondering, when you realized that the DAO collects much more money than you expected, and also this narrative changed, how was the feeling in the team, or was it a bit scary for you as well to see that this thing becomes really big?
So very different reactions. Some were very happy about it. It became that big. When we had New York Times title page, and there was a lot of press around it. I was super scared. So those people who were around me at the time, they didn't know that I was actually, for 2 weeks, I was completely gone. Like, I was having a total burnout. I didn't want to talk to people, because we discussed having a cap in the contract, in the Slack, but the maturity of the our community, the 5,000 people on Slack, they're totally against the cap because they feared that some big whales would come in and buy 50% of the DAO right away, and then like 5 million invest. And then if you would say the cap was 10 million or so, that would have 10 people in it. So that was a risk of this. And that's why I said, no, you need to make it uncapped. From a smart contract security perspective, I can honestly say we did all we could do. I don't think more time or more money would have changed anything because we didn't know what to look for. This type of bug, meaning re-entrancy, wasn't known at the time, so we did not look for it. So we had a smart contract security company called Déjà Vu. This was the company who audited Ethereum. The only one company in the whole world would be able to audit Solidity. So they did an audit. I was there in Seattle with them. I actually gave the code, not for an audit, but for a quick review to Vitalik Buterin. Gavin Wood looked at it, Christian Reitwiesner, like the founding fathers of Solidity. There is no one else I could have asked. So it's just, if you don't know what to look for, you simply cannot find it, no matter how long you look for it. So I was still scared because nobody of that size and that complexity was ever launched. And the rest is just history. We did the best out of it. Yes, it was a scary part. But also, maybe one last remark to this. I spoke with Alex van der Sande, and I actually agree with him. Even if the DAO would not be hacked, I don't know if it would have worked from a governance perspective. Like they were not active, they did not vote, they were super scared, the curators didn't know what to do. So even if there would be no hack, I do not know if the DAO would have been successful. Maybe at some point they would have said, we improve over it over time, we do maybe a payback or only use part of the funds, I don't know. So in that regard, this maybe surprises people, but at the day of the hack, I of course was super down. It was a very sad day for me, but there was a little bit of relief in the sense of this DAO is now over because you don't know what would have happened afterwards. What if it's just used for, don't know, terrorism financing and some really, really, really bad guys doing really, really bad stuff with it? I would have no control over it. I had no DAO tokens, zero control over it. So from that sense, it was a little bit relief, but still very intense. Yeah.
Cool, thanks. Very interesting. Thanks for the honest answer also.
Maybe one more question. Alex, you raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you very much. Christoph, thank you very much for your talk. It was very interesting. I wanted to ask you, did you ever had the possibility to talk with Vitalik Buterin about the happenings after the DAO was resolved?
We met quite some times afterward, yeah. So I'm not in a very close contact with him today, but usually at DEF CON we have met. So I've been at every DEF CON so far, and I mean, he wanted to stay an arm's length away by purpose, of course, also at the Ethereum Foundation. We all just tried, how can we do the best out of this? And his goal was to get a buy-in from the community. We tried to get this through this Ether vote, which of course only a very small part of the Ether holders actively voted for it. But from all what we could get from Reddit, Twitter, I think Discord, I know, mostly was on Reddit at the time. And from the on-chain vote, most of the people were in favor of a hard fork and doing those things. And this was the most important thing for Vitalik, was find a solution, get a maturity behind it. If you cannot get a maturity behind it, there's nothing we can do. So he would never go against the maturity of the community. He was, of course, intellectually there and thinking about how we could solve this. First was soft fork, then was a hard fork, trying to be as supportive as possible, but he was not decision-making and he did not speak out publicly about it.
Oh, very interesting. Thank you very much, Christoph.
Cool. Christoph, thanks again for this introduction and this keynote. Really, really cool insights into the history of DAOs. With that, we would transition now to the panel. So just like we have these 5 panelists: Stephen from SafeDAO, Una from ETH Zurich, Robert from Bundesblock, Alex from Bundesblock, and also Gustav from Kilt Protocol. And we prepared a little bit like a structured panel, and our goal is to look a little bit into the ecosystem right now, the status, what is going on, what are the challenges, what are the innovations, and what is the outlook of these 5 panelists. And with that, I would start with the first question. And the first question would be, how do you perceive the current ecosystem of DAOs in the DACH region, especially when you look at innovation, collaboration? And maybe we kick it off with Una.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben, for the question. I give it a thought, and I think the ecosystem, because I'm representing Switzerland, so I'm representing kind of a status of Switzerland. I think the Switzerland ecosystem has obviously went with the wave of the global ecosystem where we went through the bull and the bear market. So in the wave of per se 2016, where the DAO, and then there was also Aragon, for example, the framework, DAO frameworks was really a hype of DAO. And then we went to the second bull market, where actually I see a more decentralized narratives around DAOs, where they are, for example, bankless DAO, around 2020 to 2022. And also there was a juice box initiated Constitution DAO, for example. But there, actually, I think Switzerland was really not present in the narrative. And then recently, I feel like I see a really good pickup in Swiss ecosystem with representation, for example, from Steven, Safe DAO, which is a big player in our ecosystem. And Aragon reformed along with the struggle they have been. So I do think Swiss ecosystem is doing upwarding along with the global trend of DAO.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Una. Maybe Alex, can you share some insights into the German perspective on the ecosystem?
Yeah, I would say in general, we have a lot of development currently in this field, which is quite interesting. We see more and more people who are getting engaged with this. We see scholars who publish on DAOs, recently even more. And there is a general sense that in 2026, this probably will reach new heights. And we see many projects actually with that. Here's somebody talking. Maybe she could quit the microphone. That would be nice. And I think that the government's topic is very interesting. And there are many experiments right now happening here in Germany, how to use this in terms of finance and how to put this in the creative sector. I spoke with many people who are doing NFTs and try to put DAOs above it and to organize everything with DAOs, like film projects are planned with DAOs. There were projects like this before in the United States and even in Latin America, which I heard of. But now we have this kind of creative range also approaching here in Germany, and there are more and more people approaching us and asking, how could we actually get involved in DAOs, or how can we make DAOs to be a kind of vehicle we could use in our creative sector, in our creative projects and things like that. And that is very interesting. Also, the decision-making processes are in highly discussion, and the combination of DAOs with artificial intelligence, with IoT sensors and things like that. This is also something which is more and more in discussion in Germany, I would say, yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Alex. So maybe Gustav, you're the resident Austrian here in Berlin. So maybe your perspective on the German and Austrian ecosystem.
Yeah, I would even include Switzerland by accident. So I'm working in the Polkadot ecosystem. Kilt is part of the Polkadot ecosystem as a parachain. And I think that Polkadot is probably the biggest living DAO that we have right now, because it's one of the biggest projects, and it has a completely autonomous and decentralized governance tool that it doesn't only use for itself, but also provides it for the projects to build on it, which makes it even spreading more in different applications. So it does have a governance where everyone who's owning a coin, so it's also plutarchy, as we just heard. But of course, this is the current state, and it might develop even further. So people who own a coin can participate in a governance, and the governance has been updated recently, not even to have any bodies anymore, but everything that is decided is going through direct referenda. And I see that this is a very new approach to not only establish something, but also create more and more interaction between users. We also see that there are a lot of forums where stuff is being discussed, and there is input from the founder, but there's also a lot of people around in the Polkadot ecosystem who do their own things and discuss their own things. So I think that this is really an approach to really be autonomous from the founders, the initial founders, and create something that can be used for any kind of project. And the technology is basically providing the infrastructure for automated or for decentralized decision making, and also for establishing these decisions in the technology.
Okay, Christoph, I didn't know that. So you are Mr. DACH DAO then. I will remember that the next time. Anyway, transitioning to the next question. So maybe let's look a little bit more on the challenges. So because we looked at the status quo and also like the evolution of the ecosystem, let's look at the current challenges and also like the innovation in the ecosystem. People are talking about different legal forms, also like how to administer DAOs. Would be really good to get some insights from a practitioner's point of view. And maybe we start off with you, Stephen, from SafeDAO.
Yeah, thanks, Zen. And a great question. Yeah, and maybe to focus my answer a bit around like DAOs as new legal forms, or like how do we administer this in practice, right? So especially how we have done it at Safe. So there's a SafeDAO, which existed since September 2022, and is basically governed by the Safe token holders, right? So they can decide on different things. But obviously this is not like a legally recognized entity in itself, right? So it doesn't have a legal personality. So basically, how can we really attach some legal personality to it to solve some of these challenges? So on the other hand, there's also the Safe Foundation, which is then based in Switzerland. So this is effectively the legal wrapper of the SafeDAO, and how we really connect basically the on-chain governance with the real world is in a way where we have this is done through so-called DAO commissions, and they're actually native bodies of the foundations, which are occupied by people from the DAO themselves, basically. So what you actually get is the following structure where SafeDAO members, so token holders, can make proposals and vote on them, and then the outcome of those votes are basically a signal to the foundation, right? So the foundation still need to assess these proposals to make sure that they're aligned with the purposes of the foundation, and also that there's legally compliant and so on. But then they actually mandate or they delegate this implementation actually to those commissions who are very specific, right? So one of these commissions is focused on grants, one more broader about how should the resource allocation, right, of the treasury of the DAO, how should it be spent, and have some kind of a framework in place. So that's like an implementation way to implement it. And then the SafeDAO actually has an influence on those commissions by the ability to mandate the commissions, right? So what is their mandate, or what is the budget as well? And then thirdly as well, they can also vote on the people that sit on those commissions as well. So this is in a way how we try to creatively actually create a bridge between traditional governance and decentralized finance, and make it work in practice, basically.
Okay, thanks. Maybe Robert, you can share your insights. I think you're more focusing on the legal aspect, so I think we also already got like a question around that. Can you share a little bit, like from your perspective, what are the challenges in terms of DAOs?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, from my perspective, we are facing more or less three different challenges. How can we improve the autonomous aspect of DAOs more? Governance is the second part, and then regulation. Maybe regulation is a bigger part, so let me first briefly discuss the first two challenges or innovations. So theoretically, autonomous processing and decision-making is part of every DAO, but currently DAOs still need a lot of human intervention for processing tasks. So the next challenge or the next innovation, however you see it in the DAO environment, would be for me to process really automatic decision makings, for example, investment decisions that had been taken. And here I'm quite wondering if there will be the next development step by the bigger integration of AI. Hopefully it will be. And one can also imagine that in the future where DAOs holds directly on-chain assets and you do not have any token holders anymore, which are linked to organizations or other humans. So imagine it like a completely self-executing program code that is just active in the digital sphere. And implementing a good governance, as Christoph mentioned directly at the beginning, to offer a continuous and agile decision-making process is quite key. And this is missing quite often. So we need to avoid token holders or quorums that hinders decision-making, and also establish a mechanism where it requires continuous involvement of the token holders. But this is, on the other hand, unrealistic, right? So agile decision making with a large amount of token holders is maybe to a bit extent unrealistic. And for this reason, I find it advisable to have a kind of strong core of token holders who continuously participate in decision making. And as we see already in the ecosystem, we have already some incentive mechanisms to to deal with that.
Okay, cool. Maybe Gustav, can you share your insights on that as well?
Yes, happy to do so. I have the feeling that what we are doing currently with DAOs is trying to innovate forms how to interact with each other in a decentralized manner. And I'm thinking that currently there are a few use cases for DAOs that are actually working. But I think that the more we globalize in our interactions, no matter if it's financial or social or cultural or whatever, that we will find all kinds of forms where we want to interact with each other. And blockchain governance is basically the core for finding these ways to translate something like bylaws that you would have in any kind of organization that might also be complex. They might also have a treasury, or they might have the need for external people who are on the ground and working for someone, that we translate all those very complex matters of any kind of organization into a code that can be executed automatically whenever the community decides. And this can be made partly automated, that can be made by a certain trusted group, or it can be based on reputation by some people. So sometimes it will be more token holders deciding. It might be that some people get tokens for their reputation. And I think what we are currently doing is extremely important work of how to organize global huge crowds that want to interact in a meaningful way, no matter what the topic is. And I think this is what blockchain governance is currently working on and reiterating and making it easy to work with and accessible for all kinds of types of organizations.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe that's a good point then to transition to the next question. And that's maybe like a little bit more theoretical, or some people might think it's more theoretical. If we look at DAOs and their contribution, and when it comes to entrepreneurship, people are talking about DAOs are the new organizational form. Everybody should embrace that. Traditional organizations are dead. So it would be really interesting to get your insights into that discussion. What is the contribution of DAOs to entrepreneurship, innovation in general? What are the benefits of DAOs over traditional organizations? And maybe, Una, we start with you, with your research focus at ETH Zurich.
Actually, I personally have a research focus on in the built environment, which is on two buildings. A lot actually similar to, I would say, Slockit, but in a building system, a complex system, not only the lock. But I actually think about what contribution DAO have per se proven to, you say, entrepreneurship and innovation is its fundraising capability. I think like what Christoph said in the beginning, they fundraise so much and suddenly become a VC. And this I think fundraising capability has been proven that it's quite powerful with DAOs, and including, for example, the boom of constitution DAOs and all the projects on Juicebox. And I think the good things for innovation and entrepreneurship, especially on open source infrastructure, I would say, for example, Safe is one of the cases, and certain UBI projects. I mean, I can public good project. I can also reference to, for example, Polkadot in Switzerland, in Zurich, the UBI project Loe is founded by there, which could be hard for traditional processes. But as for a really organizational structure, I think it's to be debated, because I often run into also people outside Web3 and have working on alternative organizational structures, and it's a rigorous debate per se, like what we can really bring to the table new, right? It's not like we invented democracy or anything like that. So I think there are certain features I think it's unique to DAOs, which are kind of transparency, fluidity, like the spectrum of design, for example, that Christoph also mentioned, of voting mechanism, or governance mechanism, and then the programmability to it, right? And then, but with every single one of this feature, there's also things that we need to be careful, right? There's also a downfall with these features. So I think that's kind of my take on this question.
Absolutely, and downfalls. Maybe it would be really interesting to hear Stephen's point of view now from a practitioner's point of view. How do you see your DAO at SAFE?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and especially I very much agree with Una, with what you said as well, especially on the fundraising capabilities and other points you made. But yeah, I would say maybe more theoretically first, but like, or in theory, like definitely I think the fact that DAOs are open by design, I think it's a huge, benefit over traditional organizational structures. Like everybody can be involved in what form or not if they want to, right? Things are being built in the open. We're also trying, our code, everything is open source. Other projects can build on top of what we're doing. So really, it's composability feature as well. Also, when it comes to governance, everything in a way is in the open, from early discussions to making proposals on that sense. So really, this openness, I think it's a huge benefit. It really lowers the barriers to entry quite a bit. So I think it also in terms of innovation, right? Given that it's open, I think it also has a potential to compound much faster than if you would work more siloed or traditional structures, I would say. So I think that's the first benefit. The second part is also the transparency, where of it basically given a lot of the decisions are visible by everyone, whether it's the actual votes on the blockchain itself or discussions or the codes and so on, right? So I think it's also quite critical basically because it really brings some kind of a trust, especially given you have a lot of these pseudo-anonymous relationships, right, between the DAO members. So I think that's quite a key feature. So those two things I think I see a really potential. But obviously in practice, I think you really see like the whole spectrum of this, of like how decentralized or how open and how transparent DAOs really are, right? So, and I think there's a variety of reasons for that, why we see that. So, but I think there's quite some potential from that perspective.
Thanks, Stephen. Gustav, any thoughts or insights from you on that, on the benefits of DAOs versus traditional organizations?
I would say that one of the key factors is that it's really easy to onboard onto a DAO because you can interact directly with your coins or participate in decision making without being there and without even having to reveal who you are. So it's just a very, very different form to interact based on your own interest without any, as already mentioned, without being close to a certain environment or a certain kind of people.
Absolutely. That's what always people like mention as a huge benefit to join DAOs. It's really accessible and easy. But maybe we talked enough about the benefits and the fancy and the shiny things in DAOs. Maybe we focus a little bit more on the challenges. And when we prepared this webinar, there was one question always coming up and is related to legal. What are the legal challenges? At DAO Suisse, it's always about like the first question, what we often get from new members is like, how can I set up a DAO in a legal and compliant way? So the next question is really like focusing on the legal challenges. I just want to remind everybody, this is no legal advice. That's for all the participants here. And for you, Robert, Alex, and Stephen, who give an answer, I don't want to hear that depends on the question. I want to have really like some meat here. So Robert, starting with you, what are the challenges?
Yeah, thanks. No lawyers answers today. So first of all, I think there is a big difference we have to make, or for understanding. We need to separate real DAOs so that do not have any local nexus, and DAOs that uses legal wrappers. And I always call them dinos. Why? Because it's decentralized in name only. Maybe this is a distinction we have to make at the very beginning. And the real DAOs without a legal wrapper, for your information, more or less always create a so-called partnership, which results then in a full liability of its token holders. So every liability the DAO or its token holders or decisions create results then in a full liability of potential claims. This is something you always have to keep in mind. But the big question is, how do we handle all this compliance matters? And from my perspective, you can use legal wrappers, but currently I do not see any kind of legal form on the market available that fulfill, from my perspective, the needs of a DAO and their token holders. So we would like to have direct involvement of token holders. There are a couple of legal forms, especially in the US, that allows close interaction of token holders in direct decision making. That's not discussable, and it's totally right. We have here a couple of legal forms available, but they're in the US, which results then, if you are located in Europe, in quite extensive compliance matters, which is quite cost intensive because you need to pay all the lawyers and tax advisors. But nevertheless, currently in Europe, we have a couple of forms that are suitable depending on your case. And here's maybe the only lawyer answer I have to give today. So maybe the question is, to which extent would you like, when you design a DAO, would you like to involve token holders in the operational decision making? And as we heard already at the beginning, and as we discussed during our panel so far, it is not always good to have token holders involved in every operational decision. Thanks.
Okay. What I completely forgot for all the participants, Robert and Alex, they wrote a book about DAOs and the governance and the legal aspects. So maybe if you Google that, it's maybe an interesting read for all of you. Alex, maybe that's a good segue for you from your perspective.
Yeah, thank you very much. At this point, I also have to thank Christoph again for his forward to our book. Many thanks for that. What kind of legal challenges do DAOs face? So first of all, we have to look at the legal status. Robert explained that already in a brilliant way. We have the problem that it is not quite clear what kind of legal status DAOs will have. There is the thought of putting it in a private personal livelihood, something like that, that makes it very complicated at the moment. It is not very clear how to actually orchestrate that. And every system has a kind of different understanding what it should be. Is it personal liability which applies here, and so on and so on. Additionally, also coming with that, regulatory compliances is also a topic which should be more in focus here. Yeah, we have to comply with various regulations in Europe, in Germany, everywhere on the world, and then we have a decentralized system which is actually everywhere to find. And how do we now interact with this, especially when we look at things like anti-money laundering, AML, things like that? How do we actually interact here so that we are not getting problems? Christoph mentioned that in his fantastic presentation, that he was in the end quite happy that it maybe did not turn out to become this one unique kind of project which could finance many things because of AML problems and complications. And we also have many other things which we should take into consideration when we think about the legal challenges, like contractual enforcements. How can we really enforce a contract? What do we do if a smart contract is not applicable in certain legal circumstances? Liabilities, intellectual property rights, determining ownership rights, and protecting intellectual property within decentralized systems can be super complicated. And there are many, many more things which we could alone probably bring up a panel for. So, but I think these are the most important things we should take into focus here. Thank you very much.
I think one panel is not enough. I think that would be a webinar series around these topics. But anyway,
definitely.
Stephen, maybe your thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, and in contrast to Robert and Alex, I don't have a legal background, so I'll keep it quite brief on this. But yeah, I think as well, there's lots of challenges, and also what I mentioned earlier, how we've tried to circumvent it as well, because we have ultimately like a legal wrapper what we have, but we still try to represent the goals of the DAO itself, right? But in a way, how we have it, ultimately, the DAO itself, token holders can signal, but whatever they decide is not legally binding, right? Because obviously, how the foundation executes is obviously in the strict mandate, but that's why we try to circumvent it by delegating some of the decision to actual committees and so that's how we try to circumvent. But ultimately, I think if you want to be theoretically correct about a DAO making binding decisions, like that's very hard, or at least in Switzerland, as far as I understand. actually do that, and especially on the legal compliant way as well, where things about the tax treatment of the community assets as well, talking about IP and so on as well. So there's quite some challenges that we try to practically circumvent it, or at least be basically compliant in that front.
So what I take away from the three of you, I think it's complicated, and probably you have to ask a lawyer. So that's my takeaway on that. So we have one last question, which is more like the closing words before we opening it up to questions from you guys. So I would ask the panelists to be really quick in this response so that we have enough time for the participants here also to ask the question to Christoph, but also to you. And the closing words would be more around looking ahead. We had now a really cool discussion, or like a keynote around where we are coming from. We looked at the status quo of the ecosystem, where we are right now, what are challenges. For me, it would be really cool to hear from you guys now, a little bit like looking ahead. In the future, what challenges do you see? What opportunities do you see? What should we do as the DACH DAO ecosystem to overcome that? How can we collaborate? How can we shape a supportive environment here? And maybe, Gustav, we start with you.
Yes. I would think if we are talking about real DAOs, so institutions or organizations that are really decentralized, then we are not talking about the DACH region. We are talking about where does it touch ground and why does it touch ground, and oftentimes it won't touch ground at all. But if we want to establish DAOs, of course, we cannot start decentralized. So I think this approach that we are seeing from all the participants here is that bottom-up approach, that people just start building, they just start using the possibilities they find, and they are very innovative about it, to mix the existing legal and regulatory environment with the ideas of bootstrapping a decentralized community with a governance, with funding, and to foster engagement and participation in these different forms of governance. And I think the more we do that, and the more we make such realities happen, the more also the regulation will find ways to change systems in a way that are more adapting to these bootstrapping processes. I think that's the call of hope here.
So more bottom up, more bottom up. That's what I'm taking. Robert, your thoughts?
Yeah, goes in the same direction. We need more cooperation because we need to be honest also, or realistic. Currently, DAOs are more or less only active in a small part of the overall economy. So we need to facilitate adoption also in technical integration, and standardized governance solutions, which I currently do not see on the market. So we have no gold standard about governance. We do not have technical standards regarding the implementation of a DAO, but this would be a part to shift it in the other parts, in the bigger parts of the economy. And maybe one other part is then also the regulatory and also the investment environment. Currently, we are in the crypto spring, so hopefully investors would be more attracted to DAOs and the organization thing. But also we need to address politicians, we need to address government bodies, more or less, or agencies. And this is something where DAO Suisse and also Bundesblock can participate and move the whole ecosystem forward.
Absolutely. I remember the time in 2021 when I got into DAOs, everybody wanted to quit their normal job and working for DAOs. So maybe that was a little bit like too early.
Far away.
Stephen, your thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, very much echo from the prior answer already, but maybe I would say generally I think we're going to have to iterate quite a bit about experimenting with like what's going to work in practice as well with forms. So I think definitely experimentation and iteration, I think, is very key in terms of like finding the sweet spot between what should be decided by the DAO and also what should be done more by a core team. So really this being able to execute in an efficient way, also potentially commercially efficient, but at the same time still be legally compliant. So I think that really requires experimentation and stuff. And I think the other part then also, I guess, is more, is lots of dialogue and education, I guess, with regulators government bodies as well about like why just potentially not just like shoehorning traditional regulation into like DAOs is not always the best way, but like really finding ways that makes more sense. So I think those two aspects I think are quite important in my view.
Absolutely. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think in the future, DAOs will face challenges in integrating emerging technologies, such as artificial intelligence or utilizing micropayments via the blockchain. And these are important topics which we have to focus, especially if we look into IoT, sensor technologies, robot technologies, and self-driving cars, everything that's coming up. I think DAOs also will play there a very important role, and maybe they will even provide us new ways of understanding how to organize such things. And I'm not only talking about how to organize companies better or corporations or how people work with each other and interact, but maybe also how we understand to organize some more things in the mind, like patent laws or copyright laws or competition laws. And I think all these mechanisms could be also solved by applying DAOs, especially if we try to improve administration and administrative processes and something like that. So I think this is something we definitely have to take into consideration, the development of emerging technologies here. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Maybe to extend that, I would love to see a political party to be organized like a DAO. A really like grassroots bottom-up political party, but that's maybe a wish, a dream, a hope. Anyway, Una, your last thoughts and words.
Yeah, I think what I've been these days working on is trying to break basically the boundary from Web3 to the real world, where I do think where it's important to have a real world utility and to have a communication cross-pollination with, that's why I think Switzerland is a super good place. I mean, the whole DACH region is a really good place. There are a lot of alternative organization forms that people are already experimenting, and we should really cross-pollination this governance mechanism and really take advantage of the new tool per se we have. And then, which I also, this bring to the topic of on the tech side, I do think then interoperability will be very important in the future, because real world users doesn't really care which chain, or shouldn't care which chain they're really on. So these are some trends I'm seeing and actively trying to build.
Thanks. Just to summing that up, so what I see here is like there are some DAO enthusiasts. There are challenges. Apparently, everybody sees the challenges. Many of them are around legal, but there are also like opportunities, and I think that's the important thing. Also, reminding from the keynote, we are on this 8-year journey now with the DAO, with DAOs. I think it's pretty early. And I think it's an exciting journey. So first of all, thank you very much, Christoph, for being here for the keynote. Really cool to get these insights. Thank you guys for the panel. And with that, I would open it up for the participants here to ask questions. So everybody who wants can unmute and maybe ask a question. We can coordinate here.